Hello and welcome to the Humans of Growth podcast, where we talk about the stories and strategies behind business growth and development. I'm your host, Aly Hathcock, and today's episode is sponsored by Pearson Network, the new way for brands to find the right fit marketing partners. If you are looking for marketing support and don't know where to turn, head to pearsonnetwork.com to schedule a free strategy session. Today's guest is Leah Keggi. Leah is a marketing manager over at Spearhead Global. Spearhead is one of the fastest growing companies when it comes to spirits packaging. They help distilleries, brands take their vision and turn it into a concept that's actually on the shelf at your local grocery store by blending together everything from creative design to sustainable materials and logistics. Leah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I introduced the professional side of you, but in a sentence or two, I would love to hear about the personal human side of you as well.
I love a solid existential question, like right off the bat. No. So I am a wife, mother, dog mom, and also in my free time do some art as well. So I like to draw, create patterns, and it kind of helps clear my mind.
I love that. What type of dog do you have?
I have a mutt. He is a terrier mix, so he knows everything.
Oh. Okay, so lots of 100% trouble and probably a little stubborn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I love it. So based upon like your LinkedIn profile, what I've seen, what we've talked about, you've been in the world of alcohol for quite some time. Will you share with us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. Yeah, saying more than a decade suddenly makes me feel really old, even though I'm not.
Yeah.
But I started in the alcohol business on the beer side. I started working at a brewery where I did merchandise, so point of sale merchandise, like displays at grocery and liquor stores, and then also gift shop merchandise. And from there, took on responsibility in the marketing department, started managing that marketing department, and then moved over to wine and spirits, working for a sales agency that had some marketing support systems in place and helped grow brands from 0 cases to thousands of cases. And I also got to work with some legacy brands as well. And then in the last 6 months or so, I moved over to the packaging side because there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the world of alcohol, but there's also some contraction happening in the industry. And there's a huge opportunity for brands in their packaging to stand out on shelf, to highlight their points of differentiation, and to kind of overcome that growth slump that the overall industry is experiencing.
I love that. So kind of twofold question. You mentioned contraction. Would love to hear about that. And also, as you made the shift from more marketing to packaging, would love to hear kind of like what brought you to Spearhead.
Absolutely. So to kind of address the market contraction, I think there are a lot of sectors that have this experience where during COVID, there was a big boom. People were sitting at home, drinking a lot, probably not for the best for everybody. But since then, there's been kind of a right sizing of the industry, and there's been some additional shifts in health recommendations that have made people a bit more wary about drinking, rightfully so. But there is still a lot of opportunity and a lot of demand for spirits. It's just, I think some of it is right sizing from COVID. Some of it is just adjusting expectation as the consumer awareness and consumer education shifts. So personally, I think as a person, I don't think it's a bad thing. As a professional, it'd be really great to always be in a growth industry because that makes our job easier, right? But what brought me over to Spearhead was the opportunity to talk to more brands about packaging as an opportunity. So Spearhead, when they were hiring for my position, didn't want another B2B marketer. They weren't looking for somebody, not that there's anything wrong with that, obviously, but they were looking for someone to talk the language of spirits brands. And wine, beer, spirits has a very specific language. It has a very specific kind of intricacy to process, and my decade on the brand side has really helped me be able to approach the communication from Spearhead using the language that people are speaking in.
I love it. So because you've been in the industry for so long, when it comes to kind of the marketing as well as some of like the packaging, what have you seen work really well, and what have you seen on like the opposite end of the spectrum? What have you seen like absolutely tank?
So I think one of the things that works really well for, I mean, I think this is probably true across different sectors as well, but just brands having a strong identity. I think that there's, I mean, like outside of alcohol, Liquid Death is often cited as a brand with a really strong identity, but there's like the more brands can own a community or an occasion, the more likely they are to succeed. Cointreau owns the margarita. That's, the number one cocktail in America. It's easy for them to push in that category. But the brands that kind of either don't want to feel like they're pigeonholing themselves. I'm going to use quotes on a podcast, air quotes on a podcast, always good. You're not pigeonholing yourself. You're just talking to, one community first. But the brands that don't want to pick a community tend to kind of get lost in this generic messaging.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, like, I can't remember what book it is. I think it's probably a Russell Brunson book, but the idea of like, how do we create like a community and something and an identity archetype that people can rally around? Like, oh, this is who I am. And I think you're right. Like, Liquid Death is a perfect example of that, because it doesn't matter what aspect of marketing you work in, you know about Liquid Death and you know about all their marketing campaigns.
Right.
And how they created that. Yes. Archetypal identity around that.
Right. And it's not for everyone, and they know that, and they're perfectly okay with that.
Yes. So you have described yourself kind of as a sales forward marketer. And I think we've both seen over the past 5 years or so, more so in the past like 2, marketing and sales kind of getting merged together. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we call it like go to market, but what does it look like kind of in practice for you to be a sales forward, sales oriented marketer?
For me, and I think that, this is not just my experience, but it has definitely been I think it's broader than just my experience, but a lot of times, especially in alcohol, which tends to be a bit more male dominated, yep, the sales side is very much like we know what's best. And the marketing side is like, we know what's best. And for me, saying I'm sales forward means like I'm going to listen to the sales team. And that's sometimes, I don't know why, it shouldn't be like revolutionary. But I think it's important to understand that you're also selling to your sales team as a marketing person. A really quick sidebar to the 3-tier system in alcohol, because it's complicated and convoluted. In alcohol, a brand sells to a distributor. That distributor, like physically, they buy the product. It becomes their product to do with what they want, which is annoying. Then the distributor sells to a retailer. The retailer then gets to decide what to do with that product to then sell it to the consumer. So when you're thinking about your marketing in alcohol, you are really selling to every tier. You're selling to your distributor because you need them to bring your product in. You're selling to your retailer because you need to help pull that product out of the distributor warehouse so that it's not sitting there, and so they reorder. And then you need to sell to the consumer because that's a retailer expectation. For me, in marketing, in alcohol, you also are selling to your sales team because you need your sales team to do things the way you want them to do it. But they want to do it the way they've done it forever.
Yep.
So that's a very long-winded answer, but it means I'm going to listen to the sales team, and my goal is to make the sales team's job easier, but also keep the brand in mind.
Right. And it's interesting because so much of marketing is not just external facing and let me go sell to consumers or the distributors, but how am I, to some degree, it's internal communications of how am I selling this to my leadership team? How am I selling this to the other marketers on the team, to the sales team? That it's really internal marketing meets external to a larger degree than what it used to have to be.
Absolutely. And I think too, I've done content marketing. I've been in that position where somebody's like, oh, social media, you get to play around on the internet for your job. And it's like, that is not what digital marketing and like content marketing is. Yep. It is But I think it's sort of that internal communication that you mentioned, that failing of that is how we got here. Is like, no, it's
Yep.
not, everyone knows that the sales team gets a lot of no's before they get a yes. Well, you're going to get a lot of posts that are like so before you get one that gets really high engagement, because you have to test and learn. You've got to, it's a conversation with the consumer. It's not just posting for fun on a Tuesday.
It is very much not posting for fun on a Tuesday. And I think that it's interesting as content marketing changes and the algorithms change, just to kind of a degree where you have to run ads to get the visibility. The kind of idea that it's like, okay, just because you post it doesn't mean it's going to do anything. And you may have to post 20 times before you get one that gets any level of traction.
Exactly. One of the things I think marketers always, or not always, but often quote something, or I've heard it, where it's like, it takes someone 7 times to interact with your brand before they do anything. That statistic, because I'm a giant dork and I looked it up, is from the 1930s.
Yep.
They didn't have all of the things that we have, and they didn't have that level of like dissonance from like,
Right.
like I just also read something, sorry to skip, like sidebar ads don't do anything on websites anymore. Like most people just ignore them. So that's not, to be fair, not always true. They don't help really well-known brands because they're already well-known. So arguably they help some people more than others. But that kind of like those sidebar ads being just a fixture that someone can kind of tune out, it makes it harder to get people's attention. 7 is not the number anymore. I don't know what the number is, but
I've heard it's in the 50 somethings now, which makes sense because you think of like the 7 touches before somebody converts. That's almost 100. That stat is almost 100 years old, and you think of like, okay, which is what, Jesus Christ,
yeah, right.
And then you start thinking of like, okay, 1920s, 1930s, what sort of media did they have? They had the telephone, maybe some TV, and the newspaper, and like whatever billboards they happened to walk past. And then you look at how much media, and like, so you're exposed to 20 pieces of media a day.
Right.
We're exposed to 20 pieces of media in a second.
Yeah.
So if you take the number of touches and multiply times 60 times 24, like, okay, we're at thousands of touches which really, I don't think it's thousands of touches, but it's like, there's so many more touch points you have to make. And that's why like omni-channel is so important now, because you have to have 10,000 touches. And the other thing that people keep on going back to is like the idea of attribution. And it's like, people are like, oh, social media, you're like you said earlier, it's like, oh, you just post something on a Tuesday afternoon. It's like, no, like this is top of funnel stuff. And we just don't have a way to do like, there's software that's slowly coming out as like big data gets bigger. But to some degree, it's like, okay, we don't know if they went to our Instagram and then went to Kroger or Walmart and then went to our website and then got served an ad and then saw our founders LinkedIn post and God knows what other things happened in that, and then they saw a billboard and then but it all played a role.
It's like we just put a pinball machine in the marketing funnel, you know?
Oh my God, I love 100%.
So it's just all over, back and forth, and I'm waving my hands again on the podcast. But I think that it's something that makes it more important to understand, and also to then like communicate internally, kind of to bring it all back. Is people don't see that ping pong the same way that, and like you're saying, like even attribution is so hard. You can't get credit for the things you're doing in the same way that, an in-person or like a direct conversation can.
Right.
And even then, that direct conversation is probably preceded by all of that top of the funnel activity.
The top of the funnel, the referral, and we are, for the most part, only tracking either the first step of attribution or the last. Right. And none of the middle gets accounted for. And you have to to some degree, especially with bigger brands, you just trust that it's working. With smaller brands, they try to get, I don't know if you've seen this with like startups, they try to get much more granular because their budgets are smaller.
Right.
And so it's like, it's a little bit of a give and take of like, sometimes we just do things because we know we're supposed to and we have to,
Yes.
but we're not able to like say, this is the reason somebody bought XYZ off of the shelf at Publix.
Right. And I think too that with smaller companies, that budget is so much harder to justify, right? Like it's really scary to say, I'm selling most of my product at Publix, for example, but I need to pay for Instagram ads to increase my awareness. But you really probably do to some extent. There's ways to kind of safeguard by geo-targeting and all of that stuff right around public stores, audiences, things like that. But it can be kind of daunting and it can be hard for marketing to justify that spend up front. Like you kind of need the like, look how great it was after, because it's so specialized. So it's all, it just makes marketing more fun.
It's interesting. One of my really good business besties specializes in like social for CPG on shelf brands that are in stores that don't have e-commerce, and getting them to buy into, we need to do social media is challenging. But when they finally say yes and she takes it over, their sales sometimes increase 10-20%. And it's like, so it's like, we know it's working, but it can be scary to take that leap when they feel like two very disconnected channels.
Absolutely. And I think for so many brands, the idea of that top of the funnel is scary, but investing in packaging is also scary because there's switching costs. When you're like, oh, I have a package. Well, it's not doing very much for you. Sorry. Or you don't look as big as you should, or as like, put together, because like for across, I mean, not just spirits, not just wine and beer, but people don't taste a product before they buy all the time. The goal is always like, oh, trial. Yes. But you can't get everyone to try before they buy. It doesn't work that way. You're not test driving cars. So having a package that communicates that, like your brand, your messaging, the quality of your product, like is what, that's sort of the beginning steps for a lot of brands. That is where they should be investing or should think about investing smart.
Absolutely, because that's very much like the last point of contact. And if you're not standing out on a shelf,
right,
you're not going to get seen, especially like, so if I think like with wine, all of them look the same. And I go like energy drinks and they all look the same. Like, so I don't drink anymore, but like when my friends will send me to the store to go pick up alcohol for parties, it's like, okay, where on the shelf is this? Because these labels all look the same. And how do you go about doing, especially with wine, with any sort of drinks where all the packaging does look similar, how do you create distinction among products?
So that contraction I was talking about earlier in the alcohol industry has been disproportionately affecting wine and beer. For that reason, there's a lot of kind of homogeny on shelf. And for me and for Spearhead Global, what we do is look at how we can better communicate points of differentiation or shift your packaging. So for spirits, your bottle, like ideally you're in a custom bottle, because that custom bottle can have, a different like look and feel. It can, shape, can communicate a lot of different kind of like stylistic feelings. I used to work as part of the agency I was with, worked on a wine brand where we used color as a point of differentiation, just to stand out, because they all, like every Pinot Grigio has a like light white cream label and some foil. Like it's some ridiculous.
Foil with a font that's in like crimson red.
Yes. So I think that there's a lot of hesitance to like totally jump ship to something very different. But that's where you're seeing canned wine win. They're meeting. So canned wine is growing extremely rapidly right now. And premium boxed wine is also picking up some steam, because one, it's lighter, right? Like a box of wine is less to like it's lighter to ship than 3 bottles, so people can buy premium wine directly from a winery. It's
Okay.
cheaper to ship. It's the same volume. It's also it there's some arguments that it's better for the wine because it's when that like bag in a box, like I'd say
Okay.
this and everyone I think goes to Francia, which is not what we want in the wine world, but that protects from like extra air getting into the package into the wine.
Uh,
It keeps it fresher longer. But it's different and it looks different and it feels different and it's like communicates to the consumer better. But what wine has not been doing is talking about it in an approachable way. So everyone like focuses on like, like you can imagine the like sommelier swirling the glass and smelling, freshly opened tennis balls, which is a real quote from a documentary about sommeliers. It lives in my
okay.
head free. But talking about it in a way that's like, oh, fruity, crisp, like those words
Mhm.
that weren't being used, like that's what somebody wants to know how it tastes, not earthy notes of fresh dew. Like no one cares. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of cynicism about this, but I think that's where that's where communicating your brand benefit is most important on packaging. Similar to telling your brand story on social, right? You want people to kind of interact with your brand in a way that they understand.
Right, absolutely. Have you been seeing, I know we talked about container shape. Have you seen colors shift over the past? Because I'm sitting here thinking of like, or you're right with the Pinot Grigio. It's everything's like tan with like
Mhm.
either black, navy, crimson text on top with your foil. Like, and I'm sitting here thinking of like brands like Poppy, where it's like super colorful and bright. It's like, what happens if you did color differentiation that strong? Have you seen anything like that?
So I have seen it more in smaller batch premium wines that can kind of take more of a risk and aren't like
Okay.
worried about commercial appeal, where they're
Okay.
more, artwork, like artists, like working with local artists or having someone like in house that's doing some like more like visually appealing labels in that like you'd
Okay.
also wouldn't mind putting it up on your wall. And I think that is going to start to trickle down
Okay.
to the kind of the bigger commercial labels. They're afraid of taking more risks because they have a consumer base that while they all look similar, that Chloe's the one with the black bow, so they're afraid to like get rid of what they've already been associated with. But I think
Right.
we'll start to see with and you see it too with the non-alc or the low alc wines have more color on the
Okay.
labels. We're
Yep.
going to start to see that shift for everything because it's going to be more about fitting into the occasion that you're trying to be in, which with a younger consumer is more social. It's more
Hmm.
Instagram worthy, even if no one's taking pictures. You're kind of thinking about the aesthetic, and we moved past like sad millennial gray, so now we need to kind of
Uh-huh.
we're just waiting for these big companies to kind of shift towards the poppy color scheme because I think they will, and I've seen projects where things are starting to get more colorful.
Okay. Cool. I love that. So shifting a little bit, so you have helped Spearhead shift their messaging a little bit from we are a packaging supplier to we solve brand problems.
Yes.
Tell me more about that process. What impact has it had? Giving me the nitty gritty.
Yes. So we've definitely seen an increase in engagement on LinkedIn, shifting from like, here's a package that we can make for you to like, hey, let me solve your brand problem. Because it's important to people. It makes them want to, engage. It can help again solve their problems. And I think it's a slight shift for B2B to be more like B2C
Hmm.
marketing,
Yep.
because there's a lot of options. And so at Spearhead, like we have an awesome team. Our account management team is like they're great to work with. So let's talk about how they're great to work with and how you're gonna work with them and why it's good for you versus like you need a bottle because you've got to put a bottle, like, you can get a bottle from a lot of places.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of shifting from features to benefits.
Exactly. And I think that for a lot of companies on the supply side, it's easy to talk about features, or it's like that's what's gotten them this far.
Yeah.
But it's 2025, and I think more so people are people at work, not just your procurement team isn't an amorphous blob. It's, Dan and Steve. So they want to hear that you're going to make their life easier. Because there's also people, when you're working with companies who already have a bottle, there's a switching cost, and you want to kind of like assuage that fear of like, well, what if we switch and it doesn't work out? Well, if you feel comfortable knowing the company that you're working with knows your problems and how to solve them, then that switching cost can, not hard cost, but the like soft cost of switching goes away.
Yeah, and you probably see this as well. It sounds like with Spearhead and kind of across B2B as a whole, we've shifted away from like the sterileness of all of it, of like the faceless corporations, which we've seen a lot in the B2C space with like influencers, UGC. I think we're starting to see more and more of it in the B2B space. It sounds like Spearhead's kind of going that way of like, we're not just a faceless corporation. We're humans who like get you.
Yes, exactly. And like who are going to pick up their phone. I think that it's something that I'm like, you say it sounds so obvious, but then at the same time, it's like, well, that hasn't been the playbook, and that hasn't been what people have kind of felt comfortable doing. And that's the important part of saying like, this has got to change. That's one of the fun parts of marketing, is you kind of get to be like, hey, I think we should try to change this. Like, let's start talking about this way. And huge credit to my boss and our CEO, who was like, this is what we need to go this direction, like before I was hired. Because it's easy to like hide behind bottle shots and project briefs. And a lot of people do that, or a lot of people say like, yeah, or, hey, you can get this, like, maybe it's cheaper to go somewhere else, but your experience isn't going to be as good. So if you're selling the experience, you, I think, need to think about the experience of selling.
Right, absolutely. And I think as we make this shift, we'll see, I don't know if Spearhead's doing it yet, more founder-led sales and like people-led sales. Because like product, everybody loves, especially like more SaaS and tech, people love to talk about like product-led sales. But and that's fine when you're selling a $20, $50, $100 product. But when you're asking people to make big shifts in their business, they need a person that they can rally around and rally behind, so that, because at some point something's going to break in every client relationship, they need to know that the CEO, the account manager, the C-suite execs will have their back.
Yes, absolutely. And our CEO, she has people's phone numbers. People have her phone number. That's like part of what is awesome about Spearhead, is some of our biggest like customers still talk to her, as well as the account team that's supporting the project, but she's available. And I think that, it's like, you're not going to get not everyone is going to get that, but having that kind of like culture of like, yeah, if you have a problem, we can bring her in. That's great to know. I stay on call, like once someone, if it's like a connection I have or a connection I've made through a conference or whatever, I will stay on a process, like once it goes with the account manager, because I am that person for someone. At some point it makes sense for, me to kind of fall off communication, but they know I'm there.
Yeah, and I think it creates a level of accessibility that kind of differentiates you from everybody else, because we've seen, and y'all may still have this of like as everything shifts to AI, it's like customer service, client experience can get streamlined and things can get answered faster, but it can kind of lose the personal touch.
Yes. And I think that's where, like, what I like about my role and about the idea, kind of the way that we are talking in the industry is like, I'm a person. I have a LinkedIn presence that I use for my own kind of overall kind of career, but also for Spearhead, because I'm like, I also want to be a face for Spearhead.
Right.
And that, I think that, like, yes, I can use AI to streamline things or to double check my keywords on a content piece.
Yep.
But it's not taking my job. I'm not worried about it taking my job, because people want to talk to people.
Yep. And like, I think AI can help grow and scale. I think it can help automate processes so that humans can be better leveraged elsewhere. Because it's like, okay, if we can outsource 20% of your job to AI, to automations, that it's not about how can we reduce the size of our workforce. It can be, but it's more how can we then leverage this 20% that we open to either go get new business, build relationships, go deeper with our clients, and put our humans in more high leverage positions that light them up compared to, okay, I have to go through this SOP when we onboard a new client.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing. So in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a webinar for an industry group with our CEO. And we were talking about like, what do you want to talk about? And she's like, well, what do we need to talk about? I was like, no, what do you want to talk about? You want to talk about what lights you up. And when you give people the ability to do work that lights them up, they're going to become ambassadors for your company too. Not just because they want to keep their job and want to, especially I think on the marketing side, like it's really easy to suddenly be like, all right, I'm just doing all the things, but it's like, oh, I got to do this fun campaign, or I got to have this really cool conversation like this. Then I'm going to talk positively about my employer, and I'm going to talk positively about them to people who may buy from us.
Yep, 100%. So looking back over your career, you've worked with legacy brands who've been established, you've worked with startups. When it comes to marketing as well as like packaging, how does your approach kind of shift and change in those different contexts?
That's a good question. I want to caveat this whole thing by a lot of it is about the people you're working with. So when you work with a legacy brand, often the people there assume everyone knows about your brand because you're a legacy brand, and that's not true. So you kind of have to sit there and politely be like, I'm sorry, Bob, but not everybody knows that Hearing Cherry Liqueur, which is a real brand I worked on and has been around since the 1800s, not everyone knows that that is what you should be using for this specific cocktail. So they're going to use a competitive product, right? Yep. So working with a legacy brand is nice because you have that kind of authenticity to lean on. But it also makes it hard because the people you're working with are like, well, but what do you mean they don't know? It's like, you have to tell people over and over what the product is.
Yep.
And that's true, I think, for anything is like, when you're new, it's fun and shiny and it's easy to be new, but you very quickly have to start repeating yourself, and you have to, it's a different kind of fight for attention. So everything is, I like to work with the new ones because you're not fighting as many egos, generally.
Yep.
But with legacy brands, there's a lot to lean on. There's a lot of, you've established yourself. You don't have to worry about getting the social proof or the kind of longevity of business. Like people are like, oh, it's been around since the 1800s. That must mean it's good.
Yep. And I think with like legacy brands, you have the data that backs up campaigns more than startups.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like you were saying, it's like, I think you'll have like execs who forget that like brand awareness still matters. And you have to consistently go after the 21 to 30-year-old demographic who's exploring alcohol theoretically for
Yes.
the
Right.
first time.
Those
Like,
that are.
brand awareness over and over and over again. Just because you've been established doesn't mean that gets to stop.
Exactly. And I think too with established brands, you do walk a line of being old. Like,
Yep.
it's like, yes, it's great to have authenticity, but you have to continue to evolve and innovate, even if it's just your marketing, not necessarily your product. Like your product may stay the same, but you've got to meet people where they are now. And, like New Balances were dad shoes 5 years ago. Apparently they're cool again. I don't know.
Right.
I'm in my mid 30s. But like that's innovating to meet a new consumer. They
Right.
get kind of out of alcohol. But like when you sit there and go, well, we're the only thing you should be using in XYZ cocktail. And it's like, well, no one's mandating that legally. So,
Nobody's mandating that. And I think there's a lot of C-suite execs who need to hear that. Of like, nobody's, just because you have been the standard does not mean you're going to stay the standard.
absolutely. And that's not to pick on Cherry Hearing in that regard necessarily. They've come out with some cool campaigns since some of those conversations. But and I don't work with them anymore. But I think you're right, like that C-suite needs to understand that, and a lot of people also need to hear that they're not the consumer. They're not the customer. It's
Yep.
great that you might like this product, but that might not be your lifestyle may not be what your target audience is. And I think that's something that a lot of like good marketers know. Like
Yep.
I've worked with brands where I'm not the target audience, but it's hard kind of when you're not in that mindset to think about,
And yeah, and even if you are one person out of tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands,
yeah.
so on, who are buying your product. At the end of the day, to some degree,
Yes.
you don't matter. Like, it sounds
Right.
harsh, but you don't matter. It's like the data, like, but you have all the data. I know your opinion, but
Yeah.
something's
And
going to give.
exactly. And that's the thing is it's like, it's not to say you're wrong, but it's your opinion isn't maybe the one that matters. Or like, it's kind of like when, someone who's not in marketing walks up and is like, you know what we should do? And everyone in marketing starts to like roll their eyes so far into the back of their head that it
Yep.
hurts. It's like, no, we don't want to hear from you because you're coming at this from a lens of someone who's probably not. I mean, maybe they are, and maybe it's a great idea. I always try to listen. I will say, like, I don't roll my eyes until they walk away. But that's the problem. I think that's that's the hard part of marketing too, is like people have these grand ideas or they read one article and think this is what we should be doing. And there's a lot going on the back end of marketing.
There's a lot more to marketing than what people realize.
Absolutely.
I love it. So eventually, at some point, you will retire. Maybe we'll see, give or take. What so far in your career, looking back, what is the one story or moment that you will tell at your retirement party?
Oh man, that's a great question. I have done some very cool things in my career. I helped build out like a secondary location at the Atlanta Braves Stadium. I put a bar in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, but I will forever, this comes back to my being a sales forward marketer, forever be so proud of the day that I had a salesperson tell me that I was not like other marketing people. And that is not a dig on marketing people. But it was funny. And it was like he meant it so well and it sounded so bad out of context. But I thought it was hilarious. So I will put that on my retirement banner.
I love that. Okay, you opened up a can of worms at the end. What's the story behind either Atlanta Braves Stadium or Falcons? Pick a
Yes.
story. Give me some.
So when Terrapin Beer Company, so it was acquired by Molson Coors, and they had this opportunity to build out an entire like brew pub at the Atlanta Braves Stadium. I
The
am not
newer or the old one?
the new one. So
Okay.
it, I am not I'm not a baseball person. I have seen so many baseball games, but it was the like opportunity to be like I did that and point at something like big and shiny is
Mm-hmm.
something that like I hope everyone gets to experience in some way because it was like, it my fingerprints aren't literally on the walls of that thing, but I feel like I got ownership of it. The sad thing is Terrapin, Molson Coors divested their craft portfolio, and so it's no longer the Terrapin. It's no longer there, so I don't get to point at it anymore.
Okay.
But when it was there, I got to be like, I did that. I met Chipper Jones, who's a big Atlanta baseball player,
Yep.
who I knew from like I knew, and I was like, I know a baseball player's name. Cool. So I got to do a lot of really cool stuff that like that big shiny stuff that
Yeah.
most marketing people like want to have the chance to do. Like I love getting to do that. But I think at the end of the day, the things I did that had more impact were like making sure that the sales team could execute a program with marketing support. Like that drove more cases
Yep.
than picking a font for a menu at the baseball stadium. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing of like the big shiny stuff we sometimes get to work on is
Mm-hmm.
fun to be able to say it's like, oh look, I did that. But then at the same time, you've done smaller bits of other projects that have moved the needle more for
Right.
businesses that aren't nice and fun. It's like and shiny, and they're not the cool stories you tell at a cocktail party.
Right. Like for marketing people, they're like, yeah, okay, cool. Everyone, like not everyone, but like people do a lot of activations all the time outside of marketing. I love being able to say I did that, but it's definitely like it's different. Like you told, that shiny thing is fun, but it's not, it's not really like at the end of the day, kind of the really cool thing where you see
Right.
your work, like work. That's
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. Well, Leah, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If people would like to connect with you further, what is the best way for them to find you?
LinkedIn is probably the easiest. I am. It's You can search Leah Keggi. There aren't. I don't think there are any other ones as of now. So that's easy. I'm also on Instagram and Threads at leah.keggi as well. I just started using those kind of like professionally. I realized I should have like a personal one, be personal. So those are growing. So if you want to come hang out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in today. Thank you so much for joining. And if you are looking for marketing support, you can skip the grunt work and schedule a free strategy session over at perrysonnetwork.com. And we will catch you on the next episode of Humans of Growth.